which was comprised of UUs from across the country. The UUA did this video for the successful UU the Vote campaign during the 2020 elections. Together, we thrive. On Tuesday, there's another important vote happening in California. And as UUs, I'm sure we've all either voted or we're gonna vote on Tuesday. And if you want to see the video again, the link was set out in the e-blast for today's service. My name is Rachel Daniels, and I'm your worship associate. This is another hybrid service. It's both in person, people at the fellowship, and by Zoom. We continue to work out the technical kinks and test the technology waters. And we thank all of you for being here, both inside our fellowship and on Zoom for this hybrid Sunday. We're happy to have back our speaker, Reverend Rica, who'll be speaking from our pulpit in our fellowship. And I'm joining you from Hawaii. Don is expertly teching it up from us from Vegas, or actually Henderson, outside of Las Vegas. Pamela is our tech in the fellowship. Mike Radcliffe spent hours getting our cameras set up so those on Zoom can see the pulpit and other aspects of the sanctuary. And then balancing the sound between the sanctuary and Zoom is a little tricky, and Pam's been beautifully juggling the sound systems. Paul Bogdan was our in-house sound person last week or a week or two ago, and he was also amazing. So we have lots of opportunities to learn sound and more. And also today, let's see, I'm in Hawaii. Teresa Williams, or Cindy, is in Alaska. Annie is up in the desert. Oakley's out in Laguna Woods. Patrick's in Laguna Beach. Carol's up in Huntington Beach. Anyway, we're all over the place today. And so we love technology and the ability that it brings us all together. Carol will be playing the lovely music for our service from her home. And again, to all those in the fellowship and on Zoom, we thank you for being here. We appreciate your patience, and it does take a village and lots of love. Today, we're fortunate to have back with us our speaker, Reverend Rica Kaufel. Reverend Rica was born and raised in Germany. Reverend Rica graduated from Meadville Lombard Theological School and completed her internship here at Orange Coast UU Church last June. We were the congregation to ordain Reverend Rica in January 2021. Reverend Rica is the part-time minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Anaheim. Reverend Rica also works as a lecturer for academic English at UCI. The Reverend volunteers frequently with the Building Bridges Camp, taking teenagers from all over the region to the mountains for a weekend to teach them about systems of oppression and how to dismantle them. Recently, Reverend Rica started consulting for Unitarians in Germany. And with all this, Reverend Rica still finds time to do her favorite thing in the world, spending time with her daughter, Elsie. Reverend Rica's sermon today is titled Banana. And the write-up says, direct communication is hard, especially for those of us who are a bit conflict avoidant. But can we build community without it? Can we be in covenant without it? And what does this have to do with bananas? I know our fellowship is in a period of transition. Last week, Donna led an important discussion about some of our options. Strengthening, growing, and maintaining our treasured community are crucial as we move forward. I'm excited to hear today's sermon on communication, and I want to know, what do bananas have to do with it all? Unitarian Universalists have 7 principles that we affirm and promote. When looking at which principle today's sermon may mostly focus on, I thought maybe the 3rd principle, 3rd or 5th, but I like the 3rd, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. On the UUA website, I found this reflection on the 3rd principle, quote, spiritual growth isn't about a vertical ascent to heaven, but about growth in every dimension at once. It's spirituality in 3D. Growth in spirit doesn't measure one's proximity to a God above, but rather the spaciousness of one's own soul, its volume, its capacity, its size. We need souls that can take in the world in all its complexity and diversity, yet maintain our integrity. And we need souls that can love and be in relationship with all of this complexity. Instead of fight or flight, we need a spiritual posture of embrace. End quote. Reverend Rob Hardy's All Souls Unitarian Church, Washington, D.C. I liked the visual of the spaciousness of our souls and embracing ideas, embracing each other's communications, and embracing the change in this transition period. The order of service for today's program is in the email notice that was sent out to you, and copies of the order of service are available in the back of the room in the fellowship. After today's service, Reverend Rica will be around for a few moments to answer questions and/or address whatever on your mind about bananas and covenant and communications. Everywhere on Sunday mornings, Unitarians, we light the chalice. Please grab a candle at home. If you have one nearby, Reverend Rica, who is in our sanctuary, will give us our chalice lighting words as Dara lights the chalice.
Oh. Please join me in lighting the chalice to the words of Vance Bass. Every day brings struggle, every day brings joy. Every day brings us the opportunity to ease the struggle of another, to be the joy in another's life. May this flame remind us to carry our light to each other and to the world.
Thank you, Dara and Reverend Rica. We have two centering thoughts this morning, and you will find those on your screens. And please read along, even though you're muted. We'll read those together. Centering thought number one. This spiritual community we have established and joined is to help us find over and over again in 1,000 varying time frames and settings what are our own worthiest loves, and therefore what these loves now require of us. Reverend Alice Blair Wesley. Centering thought number two, we are all connected. We are stronger together. We are love's hands in the world. We are called to create justice. We are responsible for one another and the earth. Now we turn to our very talented music director, Carol Cole, for our opening hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us. The gray hymnal's in the back of the room if you're at the fellowship, or the words will be in chat. And please sing along at home, even though you're muted. And if you're in the fellowship, you're welcome to sing while you keep your masks on, or you can hum along. I happen to be one who hums because nobody wants to hear my voice, so.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. Let's all sing together one of our favorite songs, Love Will Guide Us. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from green to giving. Love will guide us through the hard nights. If
Thank you, Carol. That was beautiful, as always. Now, please go ahead and unmute yourselves. And we're going to read a short affirmation. This is a hybrid Sunday, so we have, again, people in the fellowship, others on Zoom, and we're going to try to see how it goes as we read our affirmation out loud and join our voices mostly together. And the unison affirmation will be on your screens. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. James Villa Blake.
Morning. Is it on? Yes, perfect. Good morning, wonderful people of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Laguna Beach. It is so good to be with you all in person and also online. Now, right now, something really important happened, and you were all part of it. We do it so frequently that it is easy to miss, but our whole faith is built on it. We just read our unison words together, and they are our covenant. By doing so, we reminded ourselves of our covenant. We called ourselves into covenant. And that is so important because it tells you almost everything there is to know about Unitarian Universalists. It tells you that instead of a creedal religion, one that is bound by belief, we are a covenantal religion, bound by promise. And our promise is not to a higher entity, but it is to each other. How is that for an elevator speech? Our covenant is our promise to each other. It is what takes a bunch of people and turns them into a community that is fueled by love for each other, love for the world, and love for justice. Our covenant is what makes us us. Even though you have just read it, I invite you to listen to it one more time and really open yourself to the promises it holds. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Welcome, and let us worship together. And now that I have caught your attention and directed it towards covenant, which even though it's so important in our denomination, we don't do that often, I'm going to continue in that vein with our reading today, which is entitled The Vision of Covenant, and it is by the Reverend Gretchen Haley. Covenant is one of those words that can initially sound kind of stuffy, academic, and out of date. But when you unpack its meaning and its practices, covenant holds a whole vision for how to live in this complicated, beautiful, and broken world. It is a vision that says we are most human when we bind ourselves in relationship, but not just any relationship, relationships of trust, mutual accountability, and continual return. This is not what our culture teaches us. Our culture teaches that what it means to be human is to be an individual, self-defined, self-determined, separate even. But our UU covenantal theology affirms that being human comes down to the commitments we make to and with each other, the relationships we keep. We become human through our promises to each other. And even more than that, covenantal theology doesn't just say that we become human through our promising, but also when we break those promises and yet somehow find ways to reconnect and begin again. When we repair the relationship because we know we need each other, even when we think the other isn't doing enough, even when the other is annoying in us or doesn't listen well or isn't doing things the way we want them to be done, even then, when we realize right then that we are still connected and we cannot give up, and so we return and begin again. This beginning again, says our faith, is when the holy and the human meet.
Now we will have our joys and sorrows. And this is not a time for announcements, but just what's ever on your heart today. And I think we'll go first to our Zoom attendees. If you want, you could send a chat message, you could raise your hand and Donna will highlight you, but you have to unmute yourself. And then I think we're going to the congregation. I know we were having a little bit of connection problems, but I think Pam worked it out. And then we can share from the fellowship. So first we'll go to our attendees on Zoom. Anybody have a joy or sorrow to share?
I've been volunteering for several years now. CCEJ, the California Conference for Equality and Justice, is an organization dedicated to confronting bias, bigotry, and racism through education, conflict resolution, and advocacy. They are based in Long Beach, and though they have different programs, including a restorative justice program, diversity and workplace inclusion programs, and conscious classrooms, a program implemented at high schools in the area, they are most well known for Building Bridges Camp, a 3-day overnight program for high school students focused on exploring issues of oppression, justice, and the impact those forces have on their daily lives. Students also learn concrete strategies for advocating for justice in their schools and communities. I volunteered at these camps, sometimes up to 3 times per year for the last 5 years. The camps take place at Pilgrim Pines, part of the same forest as our beloved Camp de Benneville. Though not as high up in the mountains, both camps share the smell of pine trees, the fresh air, and the unpredictable weather. Yet while spending time at Camp de Benneville is usually a break from all the hustle and bustle, a time of rest, rejuvenation, and bliss, Building Bridges Camp is rather exhausting. I mean, what else would you expect from taking roughly 100 high school kids up to the mountains and doing some deep and honest work around issues like racism, for example, or gender justice? And yet I kept volunteering there even once I entered seminary and started my internship at Orange Coast, while still working and still raising a child. In a nutshell, during a time when I was really, really busy already. Many people, including my teaching pastor, my loving and supportive intern committee, my academic advisor, and my mom, questioned if adding to my plate in this way was absolutely necessary. But to me, yes, it was. Building Bridges Camp was my church away from church. It really was. And you may ask why. Well, I learned a lot about oppression, about systems of oppression, and the effect they have on individuals. I learned a lot about where I stand within those systems. And together, we started dismantling these systems, one camp at a time. But also, I worked with an amazing group of people, specifically young people. The students who came to camp were great, and many of them came back the next year as youth leaders, or a couple of years later as young adult volunteers, developing not just a keen sense for justice, but also their own leadership skills. Once, as part of my internship, I even got to take some UU youth up there, and it was amazing. And if these young people are any indication for the future, then rest assured, we are in really good hands. But even though the camp is wonderful and inspiring, it is also really hard. Not just because the topics are hard, but the mechanics are too. Every group has not just one facilitator, but several ones. Youth, young adults, and old adults, I guess. And age is just one of the differences we all bring to the table. There's also race, gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic and immigration status, and so on and so forth. And different leadership styles. Trust me, it's really hard. And it can lead to conflict and frustration. It can even lead to a person suddenly yelling, "Banana!" Yes, you heard right, banana. And while it may sound silly, banana is important. Banana is life-changing. Banana is what I sometimes yell in my head to others, and sometimes even at myself. You ask what it means. Well, banana is a code word, clearly, but it is more than that. Banana is kind of like a fire alarm or an emergency eject button when frustration, specifically frustration with another person, one who is not part of an ongoing conversation, gets out of hand. In times of conflict, we all need to vent sometimes, to let off steam, to calm down, to get anger out before we approach a situation more constructively, ideally by having a direct and honest conversation. But I'm sure we all had situations when venting went out of hand, when it ventured into gossip, or when suddenly the motivation was not anymore to simply let off steam, but to get others on our side, to build alliances and deal with a situation that is maybe not direct and maybe not so honest. At that point, the venting has merged into triangulation, which occurs when an outside person intervenes or is drawn into a conflict or a stressful relationship. Often the aim is for that third person or fourth person or fifth person to somehow solve the situation, to make it all better. But that usually never works. And that's where banana comes in. It is shorthand for no. You need to stop talking to me and go to whoever you have a conflict with and talk to them directly. Banana is a quirky yet clear way to call each other back into integrity and accountability, into our best selves. Because the hard work that happens at building bridges camps, the whole dismantling of racism and other systems of oppression requires our best selves. And it requires that we can trust each other and count on each other, both to have each other's back and to call each other back into our best selves, back into relationships. I mentioned that building bridges camp is my church away from church, and I really mean that. In part, This is because both here at church and at Building Bridges Camp, we are committed to building a community that embraces difference. Also, both here and at Building Bridges Camp, we are committed to dismantling injustices and oppression, both within our midst and in the world at large. But there's something else as well. Almost every conversation or dialogue group at CCEJ starts with laying out and agreeing on communication guidelines. And if necessary, participants are called back into the guidelines and back into relationship. And this reminds me so much of our covenant that starts at least every worship service, both here in this fellowship and in Unitarian Universalism at large. The covenant we have with one another is in sacred agreement on how we intend to treat each other. It is love put in action and the deep structure of our faith. Our covenant binds us to one another despite our differences and guides us in building and maintaining our community by calling us into relationship, into accountability, and into love. To remind you once more of the words by the Reverend Gretchen Haley, covenant is a vision for how to live in this complicated, beautiful, and broken world. A vision that says that we are most human when we bind ourselves to relationship, not just any relationship, relationships of trust, mutual accountability, and continual return. How do we build these relationships? I believe we do so through direct and honest conversations, especially in times of conflict that can at times accompany change and reorganization. And in order for that to happen, we all play a part. Covenant is always communal. First of all, there's the person who has something to say, who feels frustrated or hurt or any other way that causes them to feel the need for a hard conversation. Being in that situation is not easy. It often comes with a lot of discomfort, in part because the whole situation seems to start at a disadvantage. It starts with hurt or frustration. It starts with the urgently felt need for the status quo to change. And that can mean it starts with feeling disempowered, vulnerable, maybe alone. And that is an uncomfortable place to be in. But there is more to it. We live in a culture that often asks us to be nice and polite. We do not want to offend. We do not want to cause discomfort, and doing so causes us discomfort. And we fear that not being nice is the same as not being kind. And aren't we supposed to be kind? So how do we start hard conversations without suddenly being or being perceived as unkind? But nice is not the same as kind. Nice is passing someone the salt with a smile. Kind is passing someone the truth with a smile. So while niceness may make your meal better, kindness is what makes relationships better, deeper, and more trusting. In her book, Dare to Lead, Brené Brown explains it like this. She says, over the past several years, my team and I have learned something about clarity and the importance of hard conversations that has changed everything, from the way we talk to each other to the way we negotiate with external partners. It is simple but transformative. Clear is kind. Unclear is unkind. Feeding people half-truths or BS, Brené's words, not mine, may make them feel better, which is almost always about making ourselves feel more comfortable, is unkind. Not getting clear with a colleague about your expectation because it feels too hard, yet holding them accountable or blaming them for not delivering is unkind. Dara, could you get me a sip of water? Thank you so much. Talking about people rather than to them is unkind. Brown goes on saying, what is kind is to have a discussion, conversation, or meeting defined by a commitment to lean into vulnerability, to stay curious and generous, to stick with the messy middle of problem identification and solving, to take a break and circle back when necessary, to be fearless in owning our parts, and, thank you so much, as the psychologist Harriet Lerner teaches, to listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard. Give me 1 second. I swear I just had something caught in my throat, but coughing in a room full of people is so different now than it was 2 years ago. Okay. Having the hard conversations is the kind thing to do. It is what puts us into covenant with each other. And sometimes, in order to be ready for them, we need to vent, to get the anger out. But we may need to process with the help of another trusted person. But this act of venting and processing should always be in preparation of the hard conversation and not instead of it. But of course, any hard conversation takes more than the person who initiates it, who has something to say. There's also the person who has something to hear. And that is also difficult. Being criticized is difficult. Hearing that we hurt someone, that we caused harm to someone is difficult. And saying, I'm sorry, or I was wrong, is also difficult. It is not just because of personal vanity or a lack of humility. It is not just because of individual shortcomings, even though it can feel like that. It is also because we live in a society that tells us that individual power is the ultimate goal, and that being wrong is being weak. It is a society that centers being right and therefore holding power over being accountable, as long as we can get away with it. By that I mean to say that if saying, I am sorry, I made a mistake, I did not treat you well, I was wrong and I see that and I will do better, I hear you and I'm open to your truth. If all of that is hard for you, that is understandable. We live in a society that makes it hard. But even though it is hard, it is still necessary. It is still the kind thing to do. Because accountability is what transforms our covenant from words into relationships. Dr. Elise Ortega, president of Meadville Lombard Theological School and part of the Commission on Institutional Change, puts it like this: to enter into a covenantal community is to enter into a conversation about the impact of our words and actions. If our intent is to never cause harm, then we have to be open to acknowledging the way we caused harm unintentionally. because causing harm unintentionally happens to everyone. It happens to the very best of us. We are human after all. And by acknowledging this, by being accountable, we do not actually give up power, we share power. And by sharing it, we grow it, making our community stronger and better, more honest and more kind. So there's the speaker, and then there's the listener. And then there's also the rest of us. And you might say, but Rica, didn't you just say that direct communication needs to happen between those two persons? Didn't you say that the rest of us should stay out of it to avoid both gossip and triangulation? Isn't that what banana is all about? Yes, that is kind of what it's all about. But covenant is communal. Our covenant draws on the relationships between all of us, and all of us are interconnected. The role of the rest of us is not to get into the middle of the conflict, but to provide a strong frame, a container where people can solve their conflicts, knowing that they are held in love and compassion. It is in community where we know that when we stumble, we will be caught. When we fall, someone will reach out and help us. It is in community that we process our feelings and practice accountability that is rooted in kindness and love. Another program that CCEJ offers and that I was briefly involved with is Healing Harms, a program that facilitates restorative justice circles when conflict arises and harm is caused. My main takeaway from this program was that the bulk of the work of restorative justice does not happen during the actual circle time, during the hard conversation itself, but in preparation thereof, and getting each party ready to speak and to listen and to be accountable. And the process of getting ready requires support. It requires a community that is loving and trustworthy and compassionate and kind in the way that kindness offers truth with a smile again and again. A community that reassures us that we are not defined by the mistake we made, but that by the way we handle our mistakes. A community that not only requires accountability of us, but that accepts us with grace. Because our covenant asks of us to be that community. Our covenant asks us of us to be the person who starts hard conversations and to be the person who responds with openness and accountability, and also to be the community that holds and embraces them both, and not just within our own walls. I said building Regis Camp is my church away from church. In part, that is because up in the mountains, when we have hard but necessary conversations about systems of oppressions, we do not only take stock of society as it is, but in our interactions with each other, we also create just tiny glimpses of the society that could be. And it is these glimpses that we carry down the mountain, trying to affect change, knowing that change is not just possible, but also beautiful. It's the same here in this fellowship, in this sanctuary. Our covenant is with each other, but it reaches far beyond that. I believe that the way we learn to show up for each other in the safety of our sanctuary is something we must carry into the wider world. We do not need to wait for a culture change. We are the culture change. We are the people in the sanctuary and out in the world who can share power instead of hoarding it, who can listen, who can show up with accountability and grace, and who at times can even shout, "Banana." May it be so, and blessed be.
Thank you, Reverend Rica. Thank you for giving us more tools to strengthen our community and be kinder to everyone and ourselves and our community, and better communications. We're now going to turn to our music director, Carol Cole, for our closing hymn, Lean on Me. The words will be in chat, and it's in the blue hymnal or teal hymnal in the fellowship.
Please join me for Lean on Me.
Now time to extinguish the chalice to these words of Priester Taves. It is our work, shared with each other in covenant, that creates and sustains this beloved community. We extinguish this chalice, but its light lives on in the directions we have chosen today. The light of this faith lives on in us together in our hearts, minds, bodies, and spirits. Amen, and blessed be. I want to leave you now in the words of the Reverend Teresa Ines Soto. In this community, we hold hope close. We don't always know what comes next, but that cannot dissuade us. We don't always know just what to do, but that will not mean that we are lost in the wilderness. We rely on the certainty beneath the foundations of our values and ethics. We are the people that return to love like a North Star and to the truth that we are greater together than we are alone. Our hope does not live in some glimmer of an indistinct future. Rather, we know that the way to the world of which we dream, and by covenant and by the movement forward, are the one right action and the next. We know that one day we will arrive at home. May it be so, and blessed be.
Please join me now to sing Let There Be Peace on Earth.